Hello, welcome to the R and Friends podcast. Today we have several guests on with us. We have Timothy Stewart with TS Essential Consulting. He's an expert in the industry for the supplement industry. I've known him for a long time. We've gotten to work together, and he'll tell you a little bit about his background. And then we've got Melanie Fuller with Co-Create Marketing Strategies. And Melanie has worked with me for years. She's an integral part of Aura and helping us grow our company. So anyway, she's here. She's going to give some technical background and ask us some questions. And I'll kick it off to them to start, and we'll have some fun here.
Wonderful introduction, Tammy. So wonderful to be here. I appreciate you creating this platform for us to kind of share ideas and soundboard off each other. And as you sometimes get questions from your clients that are, trying to meet GMPs through testing and testing their finished products or their individual components, and they kind of ask you things, and these questions can be very situational, and there isn't just a one simple answer that is general to all that ask that question. And I think it's an excellent opportunity to kind of talk about probiotics and probiotic labeling and how that ties into 101 compliance and the GMP compliance, and even some of these third-party programs that ask for brands to do even more than minimum GMPs, above and beyond requirements.
Yeah, one of the
Wonderful to be here
questions.
today. Thank you.
You're welcome. One of the questions that I've gotten recently was on testing these multi enzyme probiotic products probiotic strains in the products. And they all these probiotics grow on different media, and the biggest one is if has an anaerobic and an aerobic test on the same blend. And like on this one, just that we have on the screen, there's multiple different methods with these, and I always talk about the CRN best practices for probiotic. And one of the things they tell us is on the best practices to list one CFU for your blend. And so my initial question for Dr. Tim was like, if this one on the screen has 17 million CFU, so would it be okay to have two methods? I've always thought you just need to try to find one single method. And so that was my initial question to him. And so we kind of talked about this back and forth. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I appreciate the Council for Responsible Nutrition and putting out information to help guide the industry and have some kind of calibration between them in these areas that aren't explicitly defined in the Code of Federal Regulations. And so if we just jump to traditional, Title 21 CFR 101, we would realize that on dietary supplements, you're obligated to report the amount per serving, the mass per serving. There is no obligation to report colony forming units or growth is kind of and give additional details about sort of the state or the life cycle in which the probiotic is in. Now, when you start making claims, the claims need to be truthful and they need to not be misleading. And so it is acceptable to put CFU on there. Like, you get to be the expert, you do get to tell them what's in there, but you still have to comply with the 101 and the amount per serving. And so that's where, you get your milligrams or your grams. And in our example, sorry, here on the screen, it's saying 139 milligrams. And so that's really the GMPs that you would be faced with, whether, it's through manufacturing process controls or extrapolating based on the activity of your components, and you're able to get a sum total of the activity, you would be required to justify it. And in this case, with two claims, the CFU and the amount per serving, you could easily be asked to justify both. One wouldn't necessarily support the other, but it could. And then we know that methods need to be scientifically valid, and that's pretty much they're accurate, precise, they're specific for their intended purpose, and it does what it's intended to do. I mean, that's kind of what's in the preamble. You have 4 different scenarios that were that made it into the preamble and their definitions. And so we kind of get a start. And as long as the methods, I think, are scientifically valid, they're reproducible, different labs can do them, you would be able to be sort of the point of experts, and you say, look, I needed to do 2 or 3 different growth techniques and able to get to this value. I think it could be justified, while it might not just be you submit to a great big laboratory with under one test code, and then all of a sudden they get you back a result that matches. You might need to do a couple of different tests and then just sum them together. One idea that came. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, the only thing on that, whenever you're doing that, is I think they have to be very, very careful on cross growth. So if it's 2 methods that grow anaerobically, they're gonna grow on each method, and so that would not be. You shouldn't sum that together. That's exactly what the Counselor of Responsible Nutrition was trying to help us avoid. I've seen a lot, and on this product, I would guess, I mean, this is like kind of a fake product, but I would guess that the anaerobic, might be grown, and then the aerobic method might be grown. But my concern, and what I ask people is, other people are going to pull this off the shelf. You can have a competitor pull it off the shelf. You could have FDA pull it off the shelf. How are they going to know how you did it? Do you have any words of wisdom on that? Because that's why one single method would be the best way to try to get the recovery. But what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely great point, right? You don't want to run a test that's sort of doing the same thing 2 different ways, and you're double dipping with your activity, if you will. Like, that kind of doesn't pass just good science test. But I do like the idea of something like an anaerobic situation versus an aerobic situation are 2 very different conditions, and that might be realistic because that's the kind of probiotics that have been selected. And so that it just makes sense, because if you were going to do it as a standalone component, then that would be the test that you would do to report the most accurate number. When you start getting, if you want to really be transparent, and I do see this when people that they want to make claims, they might actually reference the test method or the literature that they're pulling from, or how did they do this. If you're trying to not be misleading, you might have a footnote or a symbol that references a statement that then further describes the test method. Like, well, especially if you're trying to compare against another product on the market, similar to this brand, but then you want to show why it's different. Like, maybe it has more activity than this, or more beneficial than another thing. Then it would make sense to go ahead and just clarify how you achieved that difference. Quickly reference it. And so as long as it was one little symbol, put it with the supplement fact box. Outside of the supplement fact box, somewhere on other information panel that's not intervening, you could sort of define what that symbol meant. And give people some.
I think that you've answered this initial question. And it's awesome, because it's a little bit different than the approach I was taking, and that's why I wanted to get advice. But yes, that you think it would be just fine on these different methods to add them together to get your total CFU. If you can, if these are, legitimate scientific methods, and they're, absolutely different conditions or different ways of running it. And then you've, obviously documented that on your side if you get asked or whatever. Thanks, Tim. This was great. It was great to bring a different perspective and give us some insights. I want everybody to stay tuned. We're going to have other sound bites, and we're going to keep the conversation going. So talk to you soon.